The storm hit first, a screaming icy wind that tore through the trees, whipping rain sideways and freezing her skin before it could even register the cold. She ran, boots sinking into mud that clung to her like a living thing, each step threatening to pull her down, to trap her forever in this dark, storm-battered forest. The branches lashed at her face, cutting through the heat of panic with sharp, cruel precision. Her lungs burned, heart pounding like a war drum, every beat a warning, every exhale a desperate prayer. She could hear them before she saw them. The low, rolling growl that threaded through the storm, twisting the sound of rain into something vicious. Eyes glimmered in the shadows, gold and green like twin lanterns of hunger. Wolves, or what she feared might be more than wolves, circling, stalking her with an intelligence that made her skin crawl. Not just predators. Hunters. She was the quarry. And yet, there was something in their movements that mirrored her own turmoil, something in their anticipation that matched the frantic pulse of her own silver-lit veins. "Don't shift. Not now. Keep control," she whispered, teeth chattering, voice barely audible over the wind. Silver light danced beneath her skin, threads of energy coiling and uncoiling like living fire. It teased her, a taste of something vast and dangerous, something that could save her, or destroy everything she touched. She had never let it fully awaken, never let herself lose control, but now it throbbed insistently, whispering, urging, screaming to be released. And yet she fought it, knowing the cost of even a moment's surrender. Branches whipped her face again, snapping under her frantic hands as she pushed through the forest. Boots skidded across slick roots and frozen mud, each misstep a knife of panic through her chest. Every movement was a gamble, every breath a fragile thread. Somewhere behind her, the soft crunch of paws on frozen earth, closer, calculating, inevitable. And she ran faster, driven not by hope, but by raw, trembling, desperate survival. If you crave forbidden love and destiny-charged werewolf stories, she thought, or rather if you watching crave stories where fate claws and burns, where power is both gift and curse, subscribe to Anne's romance collections. Because this is only the beginning. For a moment the world seemed to narrow, collapsing into the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Rain cut across her face, blinding, cold, relentless. She stumbled, knees scraping rocks hidden beneath mud, arms catching against gnarled trees. The wolves howled in response to her stumble, a chorus of anticipation and fear welled up in her chest, hot and bitter. But beneath that fear, beneath the panic and the storm, a spark of something stubborn and fierce glimmered. She was not just prey, not just a frightened girl. She was more, much more, and the world would soon remember that. The ice-carved caves ahead promised shelter, but the promise came with its own peril. She slipped inside, the cold biting deep, and hunched in the shadowed entrance, shaking. Her teeth chattered, her arms wrapped around her body, and she tried to pull herself together, even as memory crashed in. Her mother's whispered warnings, the pack's rejection, the early awakening of a power too wild for anyone to understand. They called her cursed, dangerous, a mistake. And yet here she was, still running, still breathing, still fighting. The wolves' howls echoed in the caves, bouncing off stone walls in distorted, haunting tones. Each echo sounded like a challenge, a reflection of her own internal struggle. Their eyes glowed through the shadows outside. Their presence was palpable, intelligent, cunning. And somewhere in the distance a shadow moved, silent, deliberate. Watching. Waiting. Her pulse quickened. Not just wolves. Not just danger. Something else, unseen but aware. Something, or someone, knew she was here. She tried to calm herself, tried to steady the silver fire that pulsed beneath her skin. But the moment she closed her eyes, she saw it. Flashes of silver light, uncontrollable bursts that had marked her from the beginning. If she gave in, she would be a beacon, a siren in the storm. And whatever hunted her would find her. And she could not afford to be found, not now, not like this. The first wolf struck without warning, leaping from shadow to shadow, teeth flashing like white fire. She twisted, dodged, leaving a streak of silver sparks that lit the storm-darkened forest in brief, blinding flashes. Each spark was a heartbeat, each movement a surge of instinct and raw, untamed power. Her chest heaved. Fear and exhilaration tangled inside her like writhing fire, and she realized with a cold certainty, survival might cost more than her life. It might cost her everything she was, but she would not stop. She could not stop. Branches whipped her face again, snapping like whips, cutting through the rain-lashed night. Her boots slipped on frozen roots, mud coating her hands, her knees, her face. The silver fire flared in her veins, bright, angry and hungry, matching the rhythm of the pounding wolves behind her. She ran because she had to. She ran because the alternative, stopping, falling, letting herself be claimed, was unthinkable. And as she ran, she felt a stirring, a connection she did not fully understand, a whisper in the storm that she was not alone. Not entirely. Even as fear clawed at her chest, a small ember of defiance burned, fierce and unyielding. She had been hunted, betrayed, feared and misunderstood, and yet here she was. Still running. Still breathing. Still alive. And in that moment she understood something primal. The storm, the wolves, the silver fire, they were all part of her story, and no one, not even the night, would take that from her. The shadow at the edge of the trees moved again, closer now, deliberate. Eyes glowed like molten gold, measuring, calculating, waiting for her to falter. But she did not falter. Not yet. She pressed forward, boots splashing through icy puddles, breath tearing from her lungs, heart hammering a wild rhythm. Every step was a promise. To herself, to the storm, to the wild, pulsing power that lived beneath her skin. She didn't know who or what was waiting, but she knew one thing. Tonight would change everything. And she would survive even if it killed her to do so. Because she was not prey. Not a victim. She was something else entirely. Something dangerous. Something magnificent. And so she ran into the storm, silver light pulsing beneath her skin, mud and blood and rain mixing into a wild, desperate symphony of survival. Wolves circled. Shadows watched. And somewhere in the chaos of the forest, destiny stirred, waiting for her to stumble, waiting for her to rise. The forest seemed to still around her, as if it had recognized the presence that had emerged from the shadows. One moment she was running, driven by fear, muscles screaming and lungs aflame, and the next she collided with him. A wall of dark heat and silent command, towering over her, unyielding and impossible to ignore. He moved with an authority that didn't demand words but still forced obedience. She stumbled back, barely catching herself on a gnarled tree, heart racing not only from the chase but from the sheer force of his presence. Her gaze locked on his and her breath caught. Recognition, or something that felt like it, flickered in his eyes. "You," he said, low, deliberate and somehow intimate. "I've been watching you." Her chest tightened, confusion and dread intertwining. Watching her? For years. The words hung between them, heavier than the storm clouds above, heavier than the weight of the forest around them. There was danger in his aura, yes, a dangerous power that thrummed beneath the surface like coiled steel waiting to spring. But there was also protection. Subtle, silent, the kind of presence that could either crush her or shelter her, and she could not yet tell which. The wind seemed to hesitate, branches paused mid-jerk, as if the forest itself had learned to hold its breath in his presence. She swallowed hard, trying to steady the trembling that ran through her limbs. Who are you?" she asked, voice cracked, breath ragged. Her heart was a wild thing in her chest, panic and something unfamiliar, curiosity or perhaps attraction, twisting her insides into knots. "I know your name," he said, the words deliberate, heavy with unspoken histories. "I have watched from the shadows, through storms, through fire, through everything you tried to hide. I've waited." His gaze pinned her with an intensity that sent silver sparks dancing along her skin, teasing, warning, promising. The wind tugged at her hair, the storm pressed against her, but she felt it less sharply than the pull between them, the invisible tether that twisted tighter with every heartbeat. Fear and desire collided in her chest. She wanted to run, wanted to flee the forest, the storm, even this man, and yet something inside her, a desperate, stubborn part, refused. "You don't belong here," she whispered, not knowing if she meant the forest, the storm, or the presence of the man before her. Magic, subtle and unrelenting, crackled along her skin, responding to the tension, to the collision of two forces neither fully in control of. Her silver-lit veins hummed with a latent power that refused to stay silent, and she felt the tug in the pit of her stomach, warning and calling her forward at once. He stepped closer, movement smooth, predator-like yet careful. Each step was deliberate, measured, a silent question. He could smell the storm on her, the sweat, the fear, and beneath it all, the wild pulse of her untamed power. It called to him, an ancient rhythm he could not deny, and yet he refused to yield to it, refusing to admit what his instincts screamed. "You're not safe," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "Not out here. Not like this." His eyes softened for a heartbeat, just a flicker, and then the edge returned, sharp and unyielding. The pull between them tightened, subtle, undeniable, magnetic. She wanted to deny it, but the truth was a slow, creeping flame. She was drawn to him, and she knew, even as fear urged her to flee, that she could not simply walk away. "You think I need your protection?" she challenged, shoulders stiff, chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. Magic whispered along her arms, subtle sparks glowing as if the forest itself leaned in to listen. Her voice, though defiant, trembled, not from fear of him but from the quiet, aching hope that maybe, somehow, someone understood her, truly understood her. "I don't offer protection," he said, a slow smile teasing the corner of his mouth, dangerous and infuriating. "I offer truth. Truth. And I will not let you run from yourself, or me." His words struck her like ice and fire at once. Truth. Truth. She wanted to fight, to push him away, to deny the pull, but her instincts betrayed her. The tension between them grew palpable, a living thing that danced in the air. Every heartbeat was a drumbeat in the forest. Every breath shared between them a spark of something dangerous, something forbidden. The storm outside raged on, but within this small clearing, time seemed to bend around them, stretching seconds into eternity. Her hand grazed a wound on her arm. She had scraped herself on a branch while running, and without conscious thought he reached forward, his fingers brushing her skin, tender, careful, and somehow consuming all at once. She flinched, yet did not pull away, because even through the terror and exhaustion, even through the storm and the wolves circling unseen, she felt it. The bond. Silent, unspoken, yet alive, an invisible thread tying her heartbeat to his, tethering fear to trust, instinct to desire. She wasn't meant to belong to him. The forest whispered through the wind, through the rustle of leaves, through the faint glimmer of silver that pulsed across her skin. And yet, the bond felt alive. It hummed beneath her ribs, thrummed along her spine, and settled into her chest with a warmth that frightened and thrilled her in equal measure. He stepped back just enough to give her space, but not enough to break the tension that had settled like smoke between them. The storm battered the forest, but it no longer mattered. Her pulse, wild and unsteady, matched his. Her breathing found rhythm alongside his. And in that fleeting moment she realized that something had changed. She had run for her life, for survival, and yet she had found herself more alive, more exposed, more raw than she had ever been. "You are not like the others," he said finally, voice cutting through the storm, carrying a weight she could not name. "And I cannot pretend that does not matter." His gaze lingered, studying, weighing, measuring. And in that gaze she felt both challenge and promise, danger and sanctuary, every emotion tangled, every instinct screaming at her to stay, to fight, to surrender, and yet, she did none of those. She simply stood, trembling, aware of the storm, the wolves, the silver fire inside her, and him, impossible, commanding, undeniable. Time stretched, the forest holding its breath, the storm howling in the distance, and she realized the truth. Her life had changed forever in the span of one heartbeat. The chase, the fear, the storm, it had led her here. To him. And the bond, fragile yet fierce, had been sealed the moment their paths collided. Silver sparks flickered across her skin, responding to the magnetic pull between them, and she knew, deep in her bones, that survival would demand more than speed, more than cunning, more than fleeing from shadows. It would demand trust. It would demand surrender. And it might demand everything she had to give. Yet despite the fear, despite the exhaustion, despite the pull of the unknown, she did not step back. She did not run. She let herself feel it. The tether, the bond, the dangerous promise. And for the first time in her life she understood that power, survival, and heart were not separate things. They were intertwined. And the forest, the storm, the shadows, and he were witnesses to her awakening, the first fragile step toward something she could not yet name, but could feel down to the marrow of her bones. The forest grew quieter around her, not from the storm's mercy, but from the weight of memory pressing in. She stumbled to a fallen log, frost biting her fingertips, and for a heartbeat the world fell away. The wolves, the storm, even him. Everything blurred into the shadows of her past. She remembered the first fire. How it had consumed the barn behind her childhood home, How her mother had screamed, how the pack had whispered behind their hands, eyes wide with fear. They had called her dangerous then, even before she understood herself. She remembered the cold, sharp stares of the elders as they traced the marks along her skin, the faint shimmer of her untamed power that no one could control, no one could contain. And her mother who had vanished into the night, leaving her to the whispers and the fear, leaving her to the exile that would shape her entire life. She had carried the blame, the curse, the silver light that pulsed beneath her skin, untamed and insistent. Every time she had tried to hide it, it surged stronger, a reminder of something she could never outrun. The wolf inside her stirred at the memory, teeth gnashing, instincts flaring. Don't lose control. Not here. Not now. Its voice was sharp, urgent, a thread of warning woven through her consciousness. Every heartbeat felt like a drum, a countdown toward the inevitable. She could feel the pull of raw power like silver fire under her skin, threatening to betray her at the slightest tremor of fear. And fear had settled in her chest like ice, coiling around her ribs. Her hands trembled as she traced the faint scars along her arms, evidence of early training gone wrong, of punishment when she had failed to control herself, of the pack's rejection. They had branded her dangerous. They had called her a monster. And now, standing here with the storm raging outside and the alpha's gaze lingering on her, she felt the weight of every single accusation, every whispered warning, every quiet word of hatred. Yet beneath the fear was something else. Something almost imperceptible, buried beneath the panic and the exile and the memory of loss. Hope. Not yet trust, not yet comfort, but the spark of it. Because despite the danger, despite the storm and the wolves and the forest itself seeming to hold its breath, she felt the threads of connection to him, the alpha who should not care, the alpha who should not be drawn to her. And yet he was. His presence brushed against her awareness, probing, searching, silent, and it made her pulse erratic in a way she could neither name nor resist. He watched her quietly, a tension in his posture that betrayed curiosity and something sharper, concern maybe or even doubt. She could feel it like a shadow pressing against her spine. He sensed the turmoil inside her, the fear, the self-loathing, the constant, simmering terror that she might be incapable of controlling what she was. And for the first time she wondered if he saw more than her power, more than the silver light or the danger. Did he see the girl beneath it all, the child abandoned, the heart raw and unguarded? The wind whipped through the trees, rattling the ice along the branches, and the wolf hissed in warning again. Control. Hold it. Do not let it slip. She could feel the struggle within her, the need to flee, to run, to vanish into the snow and never be found again, clashing violently with the desperate, aching desire to reach out, to step closer, to let someone see her. She was a storm wrapped in flesh and fear, a creature of shadow and silver, and every fiber of her being screamed to keep it all hidden. Yet here he was. Here he lingered, not with accusation, not with judgment, but with quiet attention, watching her in a way that made her heart thrum with conflicting beats. He did not move forward, but he did not retreat. And in that space, that charged, tense, unspoken space between them, she felt the impossible weight of longing. She had been exiled for years, shunned for power she had never understood, and yet here was someone who acknowledged her presence as if it mattered. She closed her eyes, trying to still the storm inside her. Memories of childhood flickered like shards of broken glass. The fire, the smoke, the stinging words, the sharp taste of rejection that had burned deeper than any wound. Every teacher who had failed to contain her, every elder who had labeled her a threat, every friend who had turned away, all of it came rushing back in waves. And through it all, the wolf whispered again, sharp and insistent, warning her of the danger, warning her of herself. The alpha's voice cut through the chaos, low, deliberate, a sound that seemed to vibrate through the frozen air. You do not have to carry it alone. And something in that simple, measured sentence cracked something inside her. It was not pity. It was not fear. It was recognition. Recognition that someone else could understand the weight, the danger, the fire. And it made her want to collapse and run all at once, to flee and to stay, to fight and to surrender. Her pulse throbbed in her temples, a frantic rhythm that mirrored the silver light under her skin. She could feel it responding to him, to his presence, to the careful, unspoken pull of his energy. Every instinct screamed to hide it, to bury it, to pretend that she was nothing more than a frightened, exiled omega on the run. But the light would not be contained. The wolf would not be silenced. And in that moment she understood with aching clarity. She was power, she was danger, she was fear incarnate. And she could not run from that no matter how much she wanted to. He stepped closer, careful, measured, and she felt the air shift between them. He smelled the storm on her, the iron tang of adrenaline and frost, the faint undercurrent of her silver-touched blood, and he did not recoil. He did not flinch. He only studied her, eyes dark, unreadable, yet full of a gravity that pressed against her chest. And for the first time in years she felt the weight of acceptance brush against her soul. Not full trust, not full safety, but a start. A beginning. The wolf inside her snarled, protesting the vulnerability, demanding control, warning her of the danger. Do not trust. Do not allow weakness. But another part of her, the part long buried beneath fear and exile, trembled at the possibility of connection. And it was this conflict, this violent internal storm, that made her ache with both terror and longing. She wanted to run, yes, but she also wanted to stay. She wanted to hide, yes, but she also wanted to reveal herself, to be seen, to be understood. The alpha's voice, softer now, almost gentle, cut through the storm of her thoughts. Your power, it frightens them. Frightens you. But it does not frighten me. And the words reverberated through her like silver fire. They were dangerous. They were forbidden. And yet, they were true. They touched something deep in her, a place she had thought long dead. The place that longed for recognition, that longed for someone to see not just the power, but the girl beneath it, the Omega who had been hunted, feared, abandoned. Her silver light pulsed, responding to the rhythm of his voice, the steady presence that dared to stand with her, not over her, not against her, but beside her. She wanted to collapse. She wanted to cry. She wanted to run. And through it all, through the fear and the pain, the wolf whispered a single insistent warning. The pull, the bond, it is dangerous. But the bond was alive. Silent. Unyielding. Undeniable. And though she did not understand it yet, though her heart trembled with fear and longing in equal measure, she knew one truth above all else. Whatever came next, she could not face it alone, and perhaps for the first time she did not want to. The air changed the moment they stepped into the grove. It wasn't a shift of wind or temperature. It was a presence, ancient, vibrating with power older than memory itself. The trees arched overhead, their trunks etched with symbols that pulsed faintly, as though breathing in time with her own heartbeat. Moss glimmered silver beneath the dripping branches, and a mist hugged the ground, curling around roots and stones like ghostly fingers. Here the world felt both smaller and infinitely larger. Every step she took echoed not just through the grove, but through some unseen chamber of destiny. Her pulse quickened, heart hammering against ribs that felt too frail to contain the force within her. She knew instinctively that she did not merely walk into a grove. She walked into the spine of prophecy itself. The elders waited, shrouded in shadow and age, their eyes flicking toward her like coals glowing in the dark. No one spoke immediately. Instead, the grove hummed, a resonance that seemed to tug at her bones, at the silver fire coiling just beneath her skin. One of the elders finally spoke, voice brittle yet reverent, carrying weight as old as the forest itself. The one with the mark. Her skin prickled, goosebumps racing along her arms. She had always known the mark existed, not a symbol on flesh but a presence, a pull, a knowing inside her veins. Yet hearing it named aloud made it real in a way she had never allowed herself to admit. The Alpha, standing beside her, stiffened, nostrils flaring, senses sharpening. He had always been perceptive, but now the tension radiating off him told her he understood something deeper than even she did. Her power was not just dangerous, it was fated. The elders began to circle, moving slowly, their hands trailing over the glowing runes, as though reading the language of life itself. Her chest constricted, every breath a struggle against the storm of anticipation inside her. She wanted to retreat, to vanish into the mists and hide from the weight of expectation, but her feet refused. Something primal and undeniable rooted her to the ground, tethered her to the prophecy that she had tried to deny, tried to outrun, tried to bury beneath fear and exile. They speak of twin destinies, another elder murmured, voice hushed, reverent, almost fearful. One brother to save, one to destroy. And the child of silver flame, she carries the fulcrum of their fate. Her stomach twisted violently. Twin-bound. She had always sensed a fracture in her lineage, a presence of someone she could not name, someone tied to her in ways she did not yet understand. And now, standing in this grove, feeling the pulse of ancient energy weaving through the air, she realized that her intuition had not been wrong. Someone, two someones, loomed over her fate, tethered to her bloodline in ways that could not be undone. The Alpha's presence beside her stiffened, his gaze darkening as he sensed it too. His hand hovered just above hers, not touching, yet a tangible tether of awareness and caution connected them. He knew the danger was not just in her power but in what it meant that her destiny could shift the balance of life and death, of salvation and ruin. She could feel his heartbeat through the tense silence, steady but cautious, and for a moment, the grove became a chamber of their private tension. Fear, desire, awe, and the almost unbearable weight of potential. Silver light coiled beneath her skin, reacting to the runes and the energy thrumming through the grove. It shimmered like liquid moonlight, tracing the contours of her veins, pulsing faster with every whispered word, every glance, every breath. Her wolf stirred, restless and raw, sensing the shift in power, the scent of fate, the magnetic pull of prophecy. "We are not meant to be contained," it murmured, low and insistent, yet even it hesitated in the weight of what was to come. The elders continued to chant softly, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm that resonated with her very bones. She felt the past and the future entwine, memory and possibility colliding. Every fear she had carried since exile, every moment of rejection and loneliness, every ounce of self-doubt, it all converged in this place, magnified by the realization that she was the hinge upon which a story centuries in the making would pivot. And then abruptly the forest quieted. Even the mist seemed to pause. A gust of wind rattled the runes, scattering silver light like starlight across the grove. And in that suspended moment she understood the gravity of her position. Her power was no longer a secret, no longer something to hide. It was a key, a force that could heal or annihilate. She was the balance, the scale, the fulcrum, and the twins loomed somewhere beyond sight, their presence already echoing in her blood, tethered to her in ways she could not yet fathom. The Alpha's hand brushed her shoulder, gentle yet commanding, and she flinched at the contact. He did not speak, but the weight of his attention pressed on her, a mixture of warning, protection, and undeniable pull. He was aware of the twins' involvement, aware of the threads of danger and fate weaving around her, and yet he did not turn away. He did not flee. That tether, that shared awareness of threat and destiny, coiled between them like an unspoken promise and an equally unspoken warning. Her breaths came fast, uneven, as the grove seemed to pulse with anticipation. The silver fire beneath her skin flared with every heartbeat, a reflection of the storm inside her. She realized that to survive this, truly survive, it would require more than fear, more than instinct, more than the wolf's claws and teeth. It would require trust, understanding, and a confrontation with the deepest, most terrifying truths about herself. The elders' whispers grew more insistent, echoing through the mist. Twin-bound, fulcrum, the child of the flame. Each word reverberated against her chest, reverberated against the walls of the Alpha's presence beside her. She could feel him drawing in the same breath, sensing the weight of prophecy, the looming threat, the potential for devastation. Every muscle in his body tensed, a coiled predator even as he restrained himself, and she felt it resonate through her own body, silver fire lancing through her veins in time with his heartbeat. And then the grove itself seemed to respond. Light flared along the runes, shadows danced with a life of their own, and for a fleeting, suspended heartbeat, she glimpsed the threads of future and past intertwined. She saw the twins, not clearly but faintly like reflections in a pool of molten silver. One face bore hope and salvation, the other carried ruin and fire. The realization hit her with the weight of falling mountains. One choice, one action, one mistake could tip the balance entirely. Her wolf snarled, restless, angry, protective, whispering warnings she did not want to hear but could not ignore. Control or destruction. Trust or isolation. Power or ruin. She shivered despite the silver warmth beneath her skin, and the Alpha's gaze found hers, dark, unyielding, almost pleading in its intensity. He knew somehow that she understood. That she felt the burden, the weight, the impossible responsibility. And in that shared understanding, a fragile, flickering connection formed. Not trust, not alliance, but awareness, an acknowledgement of shared danger and inevitable destiny. The mist thickened, curling around her like a sentient being, brushing against her skin, and she felt the full pulse of her power surge in response. Silver light licked along her veins, coiling and thrumming, and she realized with a cold, sharp clarity. The prophecy would not wait for her to be ready. It would unfold whether she embraced it or not. The twins were coming. Her destiny was waking. And the Alpha, dangerous, fierce, undeniable, was standing at the precipice of that storm with her. A single elder stepped forward, eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. The time approaches. The twins stir. The balance must be chosen. She is the fulcrum. Her chest tightened, her pulse raced, and the wolf inside her howled at the mounting weight of inevitability. She was no longer merely an exile, a hunted girl, a frightened Omega hiding from the storm. She was central to a story older than the forest itself. One misstep, one loss of control, and everything could shatter. The Alpha's hand finally settled on her arm, not to restrain but to steady, to anchor, to remind her that she was not entirely alone. His voice, low, almost a growl, threaded through the charged silence. We face this together. But do not mistake my presence for weakness. Fate will not spare either of us. And in that moment, as silver fire surged, mist swirled, and prophecy whispered from every leaf and stone, she understood fully. The myth was awakening and she was at its heart. There was no turning back. There was no hiding. And the world, fragile and unsteady, would either bend to her power, or break. The grove, which moments ago had felt sacred, alive, and almost protective, suddenly shuddered under the weight of chaos. A ripple ran through the trees as shadows detached themselves from the mists, coalescing into figures that radiated menace. Rival alphas emerged, faces hard, eyes like sharpened steel, flanked by beasts born from nightmares, their coats bristling, eyes gleaming with primal hunger. They moved with intent, a storm of predatory precision. She froze for the briefest of heartbeats, chest tightening, the pulse of silver fire beneath her skin racing uncontrollably. The Alpha's hand gripped her arm, grounding her, but not enough to quell the adrenaline screaming through every vein. The sound of snapping branches, low growls, and the chanting whispers of dissenting pack members created a cacophony that threatened to tear the fragile focus she had built. Her breaths came ragged, lungs burning, while every instinct screamed at her to flee, but retreat would mean surrender. You shouldn't be here, one alpha growled, voice sharp, slicing through the charged air like a blade. You manipulate, you seduce, you endanger everything we've sworn to protect. The accusation struck like ice. She had always carried the weight of fear and suspicion, but to hear it now, in the presence of her potential savior and protector, made her pulse hammer with betrayal and anger. Silver fire licked at her skin, hot, unpredictable, threatening to consume everything in a wave she barely controlled. She could feel the wolf inside her stir violently, claws scraping against the cage of reason and restraint, whispering of retaliation, of freedom, of untamed retribution. The alpha beside her did not move immediately. His eyes, dark and fathomless, flicked between her and the pack, reading intentions, calculating threats. Every muscle in his body coiled, a predator assessing the impossible odds, yet his hesitation was palpable, caught between duty to his people and the inexplicable bond that had rooted him to her side. She sensed it, every second of hesitation, and it sent a spark of fierce resolve surging through her. If he would not act, she would not wait. A sudden movement, a shadow beast lunging, teeth bared, forced her into motion. She rolled, narrowly avoiding the attack, silver fire flaring along her arms and legs. Sparks erupted where she had landed, the pulse of her power marking her path, leaving the faintest shimmer in the air as if the grove itself recorded her defiance. The air tasted of ozone and blood, tension thick enough to choke on, and her heart drummed with a rhythm that matched the wolf's frenzied growls echoing from within. You think your bond with him protects you? One rival spat, stepping closer, claws dragging along the frozen earth. Your power is a weapon, not a gift, and we will see whose loyalty counts when the blood is shed. She clenched her fists, nails digging into the palms, grounding herself in the storm of fear, fury, and burgeoning strength. For the first time she allowed the wolf to surge, not to dominate but to amplify her senses, sharpen her reactions, connect her mind to the rhythm of the grove. She could feel the energy of every living thing, the trees, the roots, the glinting silver light of her own pulse. melding into a battlefield of anticipation. The forest was not just a witness. It was a participant, alive with potential, trembling under the weight of the confrontation about to unfold. The Alpha finally stepped forward, his presence a palpable force between her and the threat. But even he could not suppress the storm of accusations raining down upon her. He hesitated, jaw tight, torn between obedience to the pack and instinctual drive to protect her. "Step back," he warned, voice low but fierce, yet the hesitation lingered, a crack in the armor that the rivals immediately sensed. She could feel her own power stirring at that hesitation, a sharp edge of anger and independence igniting inside her. No longer the hunted, no longer just the girl being judged, she felt herself standing on the precipice of becoming something more, something uncontrollable and necessary. Sparks of silver fire surged up her arms, coiling around her like living tendrils, and for the first time she allowed herself to imagine claiming this moment, not fleeing from it. The rivals' voices rose in a chorus of disdain, fury, and warning. "You will destroy us all," they chanted. "Your very presence is a threat." But the words could not hold her down. She inhaled, lungs burning, eyes flashing with light that reflected the pulse of her inner flame. The wolf within roared, its voice resonating through her bones, through the earth, and into the hearts of every watcher in the grove. And then she moved, not blindly, not in fear, but with deliberate, searing precision. Every step left a trail of light, every breath drew the energy of the grove into her. She felt the impossible, the pull of destiny, the weight of prophecy, yet she did not falter. The Alpha's gaze never left her, a mixture of awe, worry, and something deeper, something unspoken, as if he knew that the spark now igniting within her was both beautiful and terrifying. Time slowed, each heartbeat a drum of challenge and defiance. The rival Alphas lunged again, shadow beasts at their heels, but she was no longer a prey. She danced through attacks, silver fire flaring, leaving the faintest echo of her power behind. Each move was precise, instinctual, yet laden with emotion. Anger, fear, exhilaration, determination. She had been cast out, hunted, branded dangerous. But in this moment, every accusation, every whispered doubt became fuel. The Alpha's hesitation finally broke. He stepped fully into the fray, powerful, commanding, a dark shadow against the shimmer of silver light. Together they became a force neither fully understood, a balance of untamed fire and lethal control. And yet, even as they moved in tandem, she felt the inevitable truth settle into her bones. This confrontation was not merely about survival. It was the first test of who she could be, a crucible to temper her power and claim her identity beyond fear and exile. As the chaos raged around them, she glanced briefly at the Alpha, seeing not just a protector, but a reflection of the danger and potential that mirrored her own. Her vow solidified, silent but unyielding. "I will not be judged. I will not be tamed. I will not be the weapon they fear. I will be myself." Silver sparks erupted around her, illuminating the grove in an otherworldly glow, and the rivals recoiled, realizing that she was no longer merely reacting, she was commanding, asserting, igniting. The grove itself seemed to hum in recognition of her shift, energy vibrating from root to leaf to sky. Even as the pack shouted accusations, even as shadow beasts circled with teeth bared, even as the Alpha's eyes measured every risk, she stood firm, every inch of her body alight with silver fire and unspoken defiance. The first clash had begun not with a surrender, not with a plea, but with the unmistakable spark of independent power, raw and unstoppable. And in the still charged pause between breaths, between attacks, between heartbeats, a truth settled over her like a crown. She had begun to fight back, not for the pack, not for the Alpha, not for prophecy, but for herself. And that spark, that defiant pulse of fire, would only grow. The cave was silent except for the distant howl of wind against jagged rocks, a hollow sound that echoed her own heartbeat. Smoke from the fire coiled upward, curling in lazy spirals that caught in her hair, and for the first time in hours she allowed herself to breathe without thinking of the hunt, the pack, the looming threat. The warmth of the fire licked at her frozen skin, seeping into muscles that screamed from the earlier clash. He moved closer, careful, deliberate, each step measured like a predator circling a wounded prey, yet not in menace, in concern. His hands hovered over her cuts and bruises, brushing tenderly with a gentleness that made her chest tighten, her skin tingling under contact she didn't yet understand. There was a hesitation in his touch, an unspoken question in the dark depth of his eyes. Can I be trusted? I've done things I'm not proud of, he said, low voice, rough but intimate, carrying the weight of years of blood, of decisions that had carved him into the alpha he was. I killed, to claim the crown. To survive what I had to survive. And I would do it again if the pack demanded it. His eyes flicked to hers, searching, desperate for understanding or forgiveness. She flinched at the confession, fear and empathy warring in her chest. The story wasn't just horror. It was survival, a raw, unpolished truth that laid him bare. She wanted to recoil, wanted to close off, but something in the vulnerability, in the quiet remorse, softened the edges of her mistrust. I know fear, she admitted, voice shaking, almost lost under the crackle of the fire. I've been hunted, branded dangerous, laughed at, shunned. Sometimes, I think I'll never feel safe. Not really. Not with anyone. The fire reflected in his eyes, igniting something she hadn't expected. Recognition, connection, a shared thread of pain. He didn't speak immediately, but his hand brushed hers as he bandaged the shallow cuts across her forearm, fingers lingering just long enough to make her pulse flutter uncontrollably. The wolf within stirred, senses heightening, energy coiling beneath her skin in quiet anticipation. You're stronger than you think, he murmured, a whisper that vibrated straight into her chest. And I see you, all of you. Not just the scars, not just the fear, but the fire beneath. That fire could burn the world, and yet it could also save it. Her throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, wanted to allow herself the fragile flicker of trust. But years of exile, of rejection, clawed at her resolve. I don't know if I can, she confessed. Her voice trembled, raw, unshielded. The firelight caught her eyes, reflecting silver sparks of power that pulsed beneath the surface. He leaned closer, ever so slightly, and she could feel the warmth of his presence, the subtle rise and fall of his breath, the careful restraint in every move. The air between them thickened, charged with something unspoken but undeniable, desire, curiosity, longing and fear tangled in equal measure. Her pulse quickened. Every nerve screamed that crossing this invisible line could either destroy them or forge a bond unbreakable. For a fleeting moment, the cave existed only for them. Her wounds, his hands, the firelight painting shadows across their faces. She tilted her head slightly, hesitant, heart hammering, drawn to the magnetic pull of him yet terrified of what it meant to lean in. The wolf within coiled, attuned to every inch of tension, every unspoken emotion. And then it happened. A flicker of movement in the darkness outside, a subtle shift in the shadows, a whisper of wind that carried an unnatural chill. Her body tensed instantly, every hair standing on end. He froze too, instinct snapping into place, the tender moment dissolving as danger pressed against the cave walls. The almost kiss, the trembling closeness, the fragile trust. They vanished in an instant, replaced by vigilance and survival. She looked up at him, eyes wide, silver light shimmering faintly beneath her skin, and for a heartbeat, there was no need for words. The silent acknowledgement passed between them. We are drawn to each other, and yet the world is not yet safe for us. He stepped back slightly, giving her space but keeping the protective shadow close, voice low but steady. It's not over, he said. Nothing we feel, nothing we begin changes the dangers outside these walls. But I will not let you face it alone. Her chest tightened, a mixture of relief and longing that left her breathless. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted, voice small but firm, echoing her inner conflict. I want to, but the world has taught me to be afraid. And yet, he said, almost a whisper, you are here. You didn't run. You didn't turn away. That matters. His eyes held hers, unwavering, challenging the walls she had built around her heart. For the first time she felt the possibility that trust might be more than a dangerous gamble. It could be a lifeline. The wolf within her thrummed in agreement, coiling energy ready to act, but also sensing the intimacy, the delicate thread of connection being woven in the firelight. She could feel her pulse sinking almost imperceptibly with his, a quiet rhythm forming between them that spoke louder than words. Yet the cave, cozy as it felt in that suspended moment, was not safe. Another shadow flitted across the entrance, silent and menacing. Her instincts screamed, the silver fire beneath her skin flaring involuntarily, hinting at the raw, untamed power she had barely begun to control. And in that instant the reality of their bond became stark. Desire, trust, and danger were all intertwined. She inhaled, letting the tension settle for a fraction, feeling his warmth, his steady presence, the way he did not push but waited. "Maybe," she whispered, uncertain, "maybe I can learn." He didn't smile, didn't promise safety that could not exist. But he reached out, fingers brushing her cheek, thumb tracing a careful line down her jaw, and said softly, "Then I'll wait. I'll fight. I'll see you through whatever comes. But you have to trust yourself first." The fire crackled, the shadows danced, and for a moment the cave was their world. Everything outside, the hunters, the rival alphas, the prophecy, the pack, could wait. Here, in the flickering light, she allowed herself the briefest surrender to connection, to intimacy, to hope. Then the wind shifted again, carrying a new sound, a low growl unlike any wolf she knew. Her muscles tensed, the silver light beneath her skin flickering with the warning pulse of the wolf inside. Danger was approaching, relentless, inevitable. The fragile thread of trust and desire was tested instantly, and she realized with a jolt. In their world there was no pause button. No safe place to explore what might be. Every moment of closeness was borrowed, every heartbeat together owed to fate, to power, to the choices they would make in the shadow of threats neither fully understood. Her eyes met his, and in that silent exchange there was both challenge and promise. "Trust me, or leave," he said, almost a whisper, voice carrying the weight of the unspoken stakes. And she knew deep down that there was no turning away, no retreat from what they were becoming, from what was building between them, from the inevitable clash of passion, power, and survival that would define them both. The fire flickered, the cave's shadows lengthened, and the storm outside pressed against the walls like a living thing. And in that delicate, fleeting moment she realized, the bond forming between them was not just desire. It was survival, it was power, it was the first spark of something that could either save them, or burn everything to ash. The council chamber was cold, ancient stone echoing every whispered accusation like thunder. Her breath came in ragged gasps, a mix of shock, rage, and disbelief, and the firelight from the torches threw jagged shadows across her pale, trembling face. She had sensed suspicion, tension, the prickling unease of eyes on her, but nothing could have prepared her for this. "The child of the prophecy," one elder hissed, voice tight with fear and revulsion, "the harbinger of fire and ruin. She was never to walk among us." The words cut deeper than any blade, slicing through her carefully cultivated composure, exposing raw, quivering fear beneath. The pack around her recoiled, shifting uneasily. Whispers of betrayal and doom spread like wildfire, each syllable branding her further as dangerous, untouchable, cursed. Chains clinked against stone as two of the elder enforcers moved forward, binding her wrists with iron that seemed to absorb warmth, drawing her strength outward. She pulled, but her limbs were weary from the storm of the last hours, and every attempt to resist only made her blood pump hotter with fury. The chains hissed with a faint silver glow, the silver fire that slumbered within her stirring, reacting to the injustice, to the fear in their eyes, to the disbelief that this power could exist in a form they had never truly comprehended. Her eyes flicked to him. The Lycan King stood frozen, the flickering torchlight catching the steel in his eyes, and in that instant, every thought she had held of loyalty, trust, and bond collided with the piercing reality. He was hesitating. His jaw tightened, hands clenched at his sides. The pack's accusations clashed against the subtle pull she had felt in his presence, the silent acknowledgement of their bond, and yet he did not move. He did not intervene. "Why?" she breathed, voice trembling, almost breaking. "Why do you let them?" But even as she spoke, the silver fire beneath her skin surged, snaking up her arms, licking her veins, whispering in a language she barely controlled. "Do not let them dictate your power. Do not let them define you." The air in the chamber thickened, every torch flickering as though the fire itself were holding its breath. She could feel it building now, the raw energy coiling around her ribs, a tremor beneath her skin that begged to be released, that demanded recognition, that throbbed with both rage and despair. And in that moment she realized something terrifying. The fear in the pack, in the council, the hesitation in him. It did not matter. The fire was hers, It had always been hers. And it would not be contained by chains or accusations. Voices rose in a cacophony of disbelief and horror. She cannot control it. She will destroy us all. Release her power or bind her forever. The prophecy, it speaks the truth. Each shout struck her chest, but instead of breaking her, it fueled her. Her pulse quickened, every heartbeat echoing like a drum of war within the stone walls. And then she let it slip just a fraction. Silver fire erupted from her skin, swirling in luminous ribbons around her wrists, dancing across her shoulders, lifting her hair with unseen energy. The chains shivered, then rattled violently as if attempting to escape her aura, sparks sizzling where iron met the unnatural silver glow. Shock and awe rippled through the council and pack alike. The Lycan King's stance shifted, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face, but still, he did not act. Her chest heaved, fury coiling like a living thing inside her. "You will not control me," she shouted, voice echoing through the chamber, silver fire shimmering in every syllable. Her words carried both despair and defiance, each syllable punctuated with the energy of centuries of ancestors who had whispered through her blood. The elders recoiled, the enforcers faltered, and the pack's fear became palpable, tangible, wrapping the chamber in a suffocating cloak of disbelief. And yet, even in this tempest of rage and power, there was doubt. A small, almost imperceptible whisper inside her, the wolf coiled and restless, reminded her of control, of focus, of survival. One misstep, one slip of the fire, and she could undo everything, not just herself but the fragile connections she had begun to form. The Lycan King's eyes met hers again, a storm of hesitation and unspoken warning in their depths. He was the anchor she hadn't realized she craved, the one person who could remind her that power without guidance was a storm ready to consume everything. She inhaled, letting the silver fire pulse beneath her skin, the chains clinking but not breaking, the pack's whispers like a chorus of fear. And as the energy surged, the unspoken question hung heavy in the chamber. Will she survive her own awakening? The moment stretched, taut and electric. Every heartbeat, every flicker of silver, every tense breath in the room spoke of potential annihilation, or redemption. Eyes darted between her and the king, whispers of prophecy tangling with fear, every nerve in her body alive with a mix of exhilaration and terror. She could feel it in her bones. The power inside her was no longer dormant. It was alive, hungry, and demanding recognition. He stepped forward then, cautiously, not to bind, not to control, but to gauge, to measure, to test. His hand trembled slightly as he extended it, a silent offer of guidance amid chaos. She looked at it, hesitated, silver fire dancing across her skin like lightning, and for the briefest second she wondered if she could trust him, or if the next moment would bring betrayal from the one she had silently begun to rely on. The chamber seemed to shrink around them, the weight of centuries, of bloodlines, of prophecy pressing down with oppressive inevitability. Sparks of silver drifted in the air, curling around her fingers, tangling with her hair, reflecting in the horrified eyes of those who had sought to condemn her. Every inhale burned, every exhale shook with energy barely contained, and yet even as the fire threatened to consume her, she stood trembling, radiant, dangerous. And then, without warning, the chains shattered, not from force but from the power thrumming inside her. Silver light flared like a star reborn, illuminating every face, reflecting pure, raw energy back into their eyes. The Lycan King staggered slightly at the brilliance, every instinct screaming to act, to intervene, to steady, but he did not. He simply watched, awareness and awe mingling with uncertainty. She breathed heavily, aware of every spark that danced across her skin, aware of the trembling in the chamber, aware of the delicate, invisible bond between them that had been tested in fire, fear, and revelation. And in that charged silence, the cliffhanger lingered like smoke. Will she survive her own awakening? The fire within her pulsed, answering the question not with words, but with energy, with presence, with undeniable truth. She was no longer the hunted. She was no longer the frightened, exiled girl. She was power incarnate, silver and feral and burning with destiny, and the world would tremble to see what came next. The air was electric, trembling as though the world itself had paused, waiting. Her lungs burned, chest heaving from the tumult of silver fire, yet inside, a strange calm settled, deeper than fear, more potent than adrenaline. The voices of her ancestors rose, soft and commanding, threading through the crackling energy in the chamber like a river of guidance. Every syllable of the old language reverberated inside her skull, pulling her into alignment with the legacy she had feared for so long. She was no longer just herself. She was every mother, every grandmother, every warrior who had lived and died with that same fire coursing through their veins. Around her the land responded. Stone cracked and hummed with an invisible pulse. Ancient oaks bowed as though acknowledging her sovereignty. Even the air felt heavier, charged with power, bending around her like a cloak. Her silver aura flared, illuminating the chamber, catching the fear in the eyes of those who had sought to chain her yesterday. Her twin, the shadow that had lingered on the edge of this prophecy, flinched as though the very essence of her being burned his sight. He fled, stumbling into the darkness beyond, terror etched into every motion, leaving her standing alone, radiant, undeniable. She took a steadying breath, letting the fire recede slightly without extinguishing it, letting it pulse beneath her skin like a heartbeat of its own. She felt every inch of herself, muscles, sinew, blood, and spirit, aligned, whole, untamed, yet controlled. For the first time she did not feel fear. She did not feel doubt. He felt inevitable. Her gaze found him, the Lycan King. Strong, immovable, yet constrained by the weight of expectation and loyalty. For years he had held authority over wolves, over packs, over the fragile balance of power, but he had never known this level of raw, unbound potential. And she was not offering it. Not now. Not to him. She had survived betrayal, survived judgment, survived the tempest of prophecy itself, and in that crucible she had forged herself anew. "You don't get to choose me now," she said, voice calm yet laced with a power that vibrated through the walls. Every syllable carried weight, command, and finality. Her words were not a plea. They were a declaration. Every silver spark of energy that rippled across her skin accentuated it, illuminating the edges of her form, outlining a power the world had yet to comprehend. The Lycan King's jaw tightened, and for a moment the air between them crackled, not with tension born of desire or fear, but with mutual acknowledgement. She did not need his permission, his approval, or his claim. She needed only herself. Every lesson of survival, every pang of rejection, every whisper of power denied had culminated in this moment. She stepped forward, each movement deliberate, grounded, and undeniably hers. The ground beneath seemed to tremble with each footfall, responding to the quiet authority radiating from her being. Pack members and council watchers froze, unsure whether to flee, bow, or fight. Every instinct in their bodies warned them that this was no longer a woman they could control. She was the storm incarnate, the prophecy in motion, and the power in her veins refused to be contained. For a moment she allowed herself a small glance back, not to him but to the path she had walked. The chains shattered. The betrayals burned. The fear she had carried for years dissipated like mist under sunlight. She was unshackled, unbound, unafraid. The Lycan King's gaze lingered, a mix of awe and hesitation, but she did not pause for it. She did not seek validation or reconciliation. She simply walked, the pulse of her energy echoing like a heartbeat of the land itself. And then, as the torchlight dimmed behind her, the narrator's voice softened, haunting and intimate, threading into the listener's very chest. Would you have chosen her, or feared her power too? Could you have followed her, or would you have turned away like so many before? She moved forward and the world shifted with her passage. If this story stirred something inside you, some spark of longing, of courage, of unbridled power, then know there is more waiting. Subscribe to Anne's Romance Collections, where love burns brighter than fire, fate bites harder than steel, and destiny never asks permission. And in the final lingering silence, a single truth remained. Because the true Alpha has not risen yet. The chamber was empty now, yet the echoes of her presence lingered, silver fire fading to a soft, eternal glow, promising that though one journey had ended, her story had only begun.